Alright, hey everyone, what is up? This is natural lighting, which is gonna be inconsistent, like me. Today we have a lot to talk about. I'm gonna be filming a wrap-up. I know that I haven't posted a wrap-up for July or August or September, but for some reason I'm doing one for October, which is just like weird, and I get it, it's weird, but I saw that in the month of October, I read 31 books, okay? 31 books in 31 days. Yes, 31 books in 31 days. So I was like, I have to talk about this, because this is a first. So that's what we're gonna be doing today. Now, before I get into this, let me just say that this is gonna be a probably long, rambling ass video, which is gonna be a total thought dump, really messy. But look, I never expressed to the world that I was this bastion of intellect, so one, just take that into account. Another thing that needs to be said, something I wish was pretty damn obvious, but like, I'm gonna have to say it anyway because I've been seeing some, pardon my French, in certain comment sections saying that manga doesn't count as reading and that they don't want to hear booktubers talk about manga and picture books. Bitch, this is my fucking channel and I'm gonna talk about the manga I read this month. Did I read only manga this month? No. This is a booktube, so I read mostly, you know, novels and audiobooks. But listen, rule number one, don't be that bitch. Don't be that bitch who goes into the comment section and says, I personally don't consider manga to be reading, so I am gonna inform you about this on your comment section. My opinions, me. I'm gonna make it all about me. Fuck off, okay? Spoiler alert, you sound like a fucking asshole. If you wanna stand on your soapbox and blow your load over how intellectual you think you sound, probably get a couple of likes in there just to see if other people agree with you. I'm gonna need you to go ahead and make your own fucking channel because I don't have time to deal with bullshit like this in my comment section, okay? Anyway, now that you have angrily unsubscribed and left a downvote on this video, please see yourself out so the rest of us can talk about the 31 books I read in October. I'm gonna just go down the list, gonna go on Goodreads, and do my best to be as coherent and succinct as possible because I really do not feel like editing a feature-length film where I'm literally just sitting down and talking and having to listen to myself sit down and talk, okay? Alright, so since this was the month of October, I was like, I am gonna get on my horror shit, okay? Why is the lighting like this?
A few moments later.
So naturally, the first vlog I did this month was an extreme horror reading vlog, and we start off with the book Genital Grinder by Ryan Harding. I had high hopes for this book, considering the title and the cover. That's a gnarly cover, so I was like, I want to vomit, I want to cry, I want to puke. What I ended up doing was fighting off sleep because this book was so boring. I'm sorry, it was just so boring. It's basically this collection of short stories where we follow different characters doing disgusting shit, and there are these two recurring characters that I actually really enjoyed. The actual short story called Genital Grinder I thought was really good. It was everything I wished the book had been. My issue with this writing was that the descriptions of the gore were very underwhelming. I gave this book 2 stars, and I wish I could say it was because I was too traumatized to continue reading, but that's just not the case. I was just really underwhelmed and bored. A lot of the times a gory thing happens and then we only learn about that gory thing after the fact and in very boring clinical detail. Reading this book was like reading the Wikipedia entry of a true crime that had happened, and it just did not deliver what had to be delivered, okay? I felt like Ryan Harding was holding us at arm's length, so we never really got inside the head of these truly fucked up people. Whenever there's an extreme horror book, I do appreciate ones that take us into the head of the evil, dark characters because that is what truly scares me. If you want to know more, I suggest watching my vlog. So the next book I read was The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. So this was my very first Clive Barker book, and it will not be my last, hopefully, because I truly loved this book. This is the book that the film Hellraiser was based on. So basically, we follow this guy whose name I can't, is he Frank? Is his name Frank? Is there a Frank in this book? I'm too lazy to look it up, okay? So we follow this guy who I'm gonna name Frank for video purposes, and he is this extremely hedonistic man who stumbles upon this puzzle box called the Le Marchand's box. He solves this puzzle, and solving the puzzle unlocks this schism in the world, and from the schism emerge these creatures called the Xenobites. Now, these Xenobites are basically the iconic monsters like Pinhead and his whole squad, his like leather-bound squad. And basically they are so deformed to the point where it looks like the line between pleasure and pain is blurred because of just how heightened the experience in their world is. Like, there's so much pleasure and pain that you can't tell the difference anymore. We basically follow what happens as a consequence of him solving that box. And then some months pass, and his brother and his brother's wife, they move into the house where he disappeared, and his disappearance and that box bears certain consequences for them, which I'm not gonna divulge because it is a very short book. I just really dug this book. I gave this book 4 stars because I wish that there had been more surprises at the end. I distinctly remember the movie having like a giant set piece, which I found to be really cool. But in this book, it kind of just ends when you think that one more thing is gonna happen. But aside from that, the writing is beautiful. Clive Barker is beautiful. Literally, oh my god, I googled him while I was doing this vlog and I was like, shit! I didn't know he was gorgeous. Fuck. Anyway, beautiful, beautiful man. Alright, so next, one of my very good friends, Judith Sonnet, very prolific extreme horror author, oh my gosh, she gifted me a copy of her most recent book, and that is No One Rides for Free. This is an extreme horror novella which she wrote, edited, and published in 10 days. How? How? I don't understand. I do not understand how someone can be so talented, but I'm just so glad that she exists in the world because the stories she tells are amazing. They are super gruesome extreme horror. I gave this book 4 stars at first, but in hindsight, I think I'm gonna raise it to 5 stars because this book made me so fucking uncomfortable in all the best ways, okay? So in this book, we follow this mom and her kids. She is taking her kids to college, and they stop at this gas station, and the mom gets down to like pee or something. And when she gets back in the car, she sees that this crazy man is holding her kids at gunpoint. She gets in the car, the guy gives her instructions to do certain things. Okay, this book was inspired by the film Last House on the Left, the OG Wes Craven one, which I watched very soon after as per Judith's recommendation, and amazing movie, very disturbing, okay? Just like this book. It gets really disturbing, like really fucked up. It's not gory, it's more like psychological, but then there is like nasty stuff that happens. I would definitely look up trigger warnings for this one. Again, for more details, watch the vlog. So next I read The Shining by Stephen King. Everybody knows what The Shining is about, so I'm just gonna gloss over this book. I gave it 4 stars. I did a full reading vlog on this book, and although it's not perfect, it was a very strong and powerful reminder to me as to why horror is my favorite genre, and I just really appreciate this book. It has not aged well though. There are some slurs. I mean, this book was written in the 70s, definitely a relic of its time. So I'm not gonna dwell much on this book since I have a full vlog on it, but what I will say is that unlike the movie, the strength in this book lies in just how internal this story is. So you've got Jack, you've got Wendy, you've got Danny, and in this book you really get to see inside their head. You spend so much time seeing what their thought process is while all this shit is going down. And all of that was pretty much lost in the movie because the only way you could have done this was through very cheesy voiceover, which Stanley Kubrick, auteur and genius, obviously was not gonna do, right? So if you want like a more psychologically incisive story about a haunted hotel, or is it, I would recommend reading this book over watching the movie, which is more of an overtly like scary movie, you know? Because this book was so much more psychologically incisive, the scene when Jack snaps, when he finally snaps and loses it, is so much more powerful than the scene when Jack Nicholson loses it in the movie. It really just sucks how Stephen King writes good stories but tends to ramble and just go on and on and on, further lodging his head up his own ass just to show that he is a good storyteller. Like, I did not need all those pages of Halloran figuring out how to use a fucking snowmobile, Okay, let's just put it that way. So next I'm gonna talk about a book that I reread, and that is Cows by Matthew Stokoe. This was a book I read in 2020, and I was under the impression that I was only liking it back then because of just how disgusting an extreme horror book it is. It is, to this day, one of the most disgusting things I have ever read. And I was like, ooh, am I just liking this book to be edgy and show people that I can tolerate disgusting stuff and see the good in it? Back then, maybe. But I read it again just last month, and I gave it 5 stars. This book is phenomenal. It is amazing. It is beautifully written. I love this book so much. We basically follow this guy named Steven who is being raised by this single mom who is very abusive. So you have that aspect to the story. And then you follow him when he accepts this job in this like slaughterhouse, like slaughter plant where they kill cows. This book says so much about, you know, trauma and abuse and rebellion, and it just has so much commentary that I can't like overtly say in this vlog without spoiling the book. I feel like the ultimate thesis of this book is that rebellion is inevitable if we don't figure out how to help the most marginalized people in our society. Because when people have nothing, they have nothing to lose, and rebellion and uprising and violence is inevitable. But that's what I think. I mean, there was a comment in that video countering that thesis, but at the end of the day, that was just me trying to interpret what the author said. And a lot of people write this book off as being just another splatter, disgusting, gratuitous splatterfest that has no merit to it. And I totally disagree. This book is a very smart and complex story. Fair warning, there is a slur used in the book. So yeah, definite trigger warning for that. But overall, this book was fucking amazing. And I need a bathroom break.
Later that day.
So I did this other horror vlog, and the next books I'm going to talk about were all in this vlog, so I'm going to go through them pretty briefly. The first book I'm going to talk about is Bones and All by Camille DeAngelis, and the reason I read this book was because they're doing a film adaptation, which I think is coming out this month. So they're doing a movie, and the movie is being marketed as this cannibal love story. So I was like, ooh, that sounds amazing. Also, the movie is being directed by Luca Guadagnino, who did the remake of Suspiria, which I think was better than the original. Arrest me. That Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton Suspiria that looked like a Pasolini movie was way better than the fucking, like, Pink movie, which was good, but not that good. Also, that soundtrack, the lead singer of Radiohead, Tom York, did the soundtrack for the Suspiria remake, and it was divine, glorious, beautiful. Like, damn, Luca Guadagnino really knows how to pick good soundtracks for his projects. Getting Sufjan Stevens to do the soundtrack for Call Me By Your Name, and then Tom York for Suspiria, fucking amazing. So, Bones and All, yes, it is a cannibalistic love story. What I didn't know was that the book was YA. I admire this book more than I love it, okay? I like what it was trying to do. I like the characters, and I do think it is a very powerful story on its own merit. But I also understand why it's only at 3.5 on Goodreads, okay? So what I will say is that we follow this girl named Marin, who from a young age we learn is a cannibal, so her mom pretty much disowns her, and she is forced to go on this cross-country road trip by herself and potentially find her dad and get answers as to why she is the way she is and her past and whatnot. And on the way she meets certain characters like this man named Sully, another cannibal named Sully. And then she meets this guy who the Timothée Chalamet character is gonna be. And yeah, it is a very lovely and powerful story that uses cannibalism as a metaphor for the outsider and the predatory instinct in all of us. Yeah, it speaks to the outsider and the outcast in society. And it also is a story about people finding each other in a crazy world and how meaningful the connection is when you find someone who is just like you and stuff like that. And that's all good. However, the issue I had with this book was that it was very weak on the gore, okay? Now, I understand that this is a YA book, but the thing is that's why, I mean, I suspect this book has such a low score on Goodreads is because people who are gonna go in expecting a YA book are gonna be put off by the cannibal stuff, and people who go in for the cannibal stuff are gonna be put off that it's a YA book. And this book never really commits to either side. It exists in this awkward middle ground that never really commits to one thing completely. So yeah, that's an issue I had.
A few moments later.
Alright, so it's been a while. I had to stop for a while because the neighbor was using a chainsaw. Life's good. Anyway, so the next book I read was Night of the Prowler by John Athan, which was amazing. The gore happens early and often, and the character development is squeezed in, but like in a very natural way, where the character gets developed in seeing various decisions they make throughout the story that inform us of who they are as a person. We follow this girl named Zoe who is working in this convenience store at this gas station, and one night she's doing the night shift. She's by herself. There are creepy men. She is scared. We are scared for her. And whilst she is at the night shift, she learns that there was a breakout in this mental asylum, and this very dangerous killer called the Prowler, this serial killer. He is this guy who killed his whole family and would go on these murderous rampages, and he is free. And he is likely gonna hunt her down, and she is likely gonna be in the path of his killing spree. So we cut from her chapters, which are really intense, to his point of view. And in his chapters, we get to see the various killings he does as he slowly gets closer to Zoe. Bitch, it is fucked up. Like, it is so gory. You will never look at a cob of corn the same way again. There is a scene where a sexual thing happens, and the thing used as lubricant is something I've never seen done in a story, horror or otherwise, before. It was just really good. This is what a slasher had to be. It's an unending, adrenaline-filled, full-on splatterfest that doesn't waste any time. It throws you into the action. It is super intense from start to finish, and I loved this book. Okay, it was amazing. So this next book I read was not for the vlog, but I finished it like in the middle of the vlog just to get it over with. And this is a book that I took like 3 weeks to read, and that is Shallow River by H.D. Carlton. Oh my gosh! So I am someone who thought that I hated the romance genre in all its aspects, but I found out that that was not a true statement because I love dark romance, apparently. Yeah, dark romance and like the smuttier, spicier kinds of books are more fun to read for me. I noticed that the same enjoyment I get from extreme horror is the kind of enjoyment I get from books like this. When I read extreme horror, I'm fascinated because I'm like, ooh, how far is this author gonna push it? And when it comes to smut or dark romance, it's like, ooh, how far is this author gonna push it indeed? So I do like the genre. So, Shallow River. This is a book that was from the author of Haunting Adeline, and basically the cat and mouse duet. And here's the thing with H.D. Carlton, okay? I follow her on Instagram. I think she's really cool. I do love the book Haunting Adeline, and I love most of Haunting Adeline, okay? That was a 3-star book, but I did love the first and second act. The thing with her is that her books have the most interesting storylines, but the execution is always very underwhelming. And I am saying this specifically about Shallow River and Satan's Affair. Shallow River was just not good. Okay, so basically we follow this woman named River who grew up in this very abusive situation, and it was really fucked up. I'm not gonna get into that because it is quite spoilerific, but the place she grew up in was not ideal for children, so she has a very traumatized past and a very fraught relationship with her mother. And we cut to the future where she is an adult, and she is in this relationship with this fucking asshole named Ryan, I think. He is an abuser. Every single kind of abuse you could foist on a person, he does to her. And this is a story about overcoming abuse and revenge and things like that, but it's 500 pages long. And the first 300 pages is nothing but abuse. It is literally just abuse scene after abuse scene after abuse scene. And it is very shocking at first and does what it intends to do by shocking the audience. But then it just starts to feel so copy-paste, copy-paste, copy-paste. And what was once a very shocking thing ended up getting really numbing and gratuitous and repetitive. And because it was so repetitive, it started to get really numbing and frustrating. And I'm not saying that, I could say this, like perhaps the author was trying to convey that abuse was a very frustrating thing and it felt like it goes on forever and they were trying to convey this in the story. But you can do that and still not give the reader this fatigue of having read the same scene over and over again. So in addition to this, there is this character named Mako who is the brother of Ryan, and we follow him. He's a policeman and he is trying to solve this string of murders at the hands of this killer. And the killer does play a part in the story. I'm not gonna say how, but it is a significantly important part. And that aspect, plus the abuse section, just never gels together. It just feels like the author tried to do so many things at the same time, like write a salacious dark romance with smutty stuff, but then also have it be this commentary on abuse, but then also have a good for her revenge kind of thing, but then also have a police procedural, and it just never coheres, and the pacing is so off. And this is a dark romance book, but I will say that the ending, the very last section of the book, completely spits in the face of any potential of this being a dark romance book. It becomes a completely cheesy, corny story that wallows in saccharine, overly sweet domestic bliss, and it just did not feel like a dark romance. The payoff was just absolutely not something that you would get at the end of a dark romance book, and it just felt like such a waste of time, okay? I was just like, yo, you wanna tell a story like this? Fine. But don't label it dark romance. This isn't dark romance. The epilogue ruined my day. So for the rest of the vlog that I mentioned before this book, I read the book Along the Path of Torment by Chandler Morrison, and I'm really glad that I did because I read the book Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison and I was just not a fan of this book at all. But in October, for some reason, I wanted to get more extreme horror recommendations that I hadn't read, so I posted this Instagram story basically asking people, hey, can you recommend some extreme horror to me that you think is gonna gross me out and fuck me up and traumatize me? Because, like, we love that. I completely wrote off Chandler Morrison after Dead Inside. I was like, I don't think this author is for me. I don't know if I want to read this author's work anymore because it just does not speak to me. It's not what I'm looking for as far as extreme horror goes. But this book, bitch, it was so good, okay? I really don't want to give much of the story away beyond the fact that it is a very scathing critique about how Hollywood is a very empty, vapid, soul-sucking, immoral place. It reminded me of Starry Eyes and Mulholland Drive and just any movie that critiques Hollywood for the disgusting place it is in order to advance your career and the various things you need to do that are not good, and the way women and minors are treated in Hollywood, very exploitative, yada yada. However, it takes this approach and it filters it through the prism of an extreme horror story, and it's so fucking good, okay? I think I gave this book about 4 stars. It's not perfect, but I did really enjoy myself. Alright, so next I read Degenerate by Rain Havoc, and this was my very first Rain Havoc book. In this book, I'm just gonna say that I didn't know what to expect going into this book, but it wasn't that, okay? If you have read the book Ritualistic Human Sacrifice by C.V. Hunt, I will say that this book has those same vibes, okay? That's all I'm gonna say on that. So basically we follow this guy who learns at the beginning of the book that his dad was killed in a mugging, I think. So his lawyer tells him, hey, come back to this childhood home where you grew up in and we're gonna fix your dad's estate. I'm gonna need you back here urgently. So basically we follow this guy on the road trip on the way to his house, and on that journey we see fragments of his childhood. He starts to remember his past. We start to see why certain things that happened to him as a younger person informed certain things that he did in his current life. And then we get to learn the very dark truths surrounding his childhood and his relationship with his mother and a bunch of other things that's really fucked up. And I gave this book 4 stars. It was really good. For the longest time, I thought this book was gonna be smutty because there's just so much fucking at the beginning. But then when we start to get into extreme horror territory, I was like, damn, okay. And I love this book because I feel like, as someone who's read so much extreme horror, I sometimes feel like I have read it all. But then a book like this comes along and is like, bitch, you thought. Okay, so it was very unique. It was very different. I appreciate this book, and yeah. Okay, so a while ago, I was talking to you about the book No One Rides for Free by extreme horror author Judith Sonnet. Now, Judith recommended to me her favorite book of all time, and that book is Endless Night by Richard Lehman, and I've been promising her that I was gonna read this book forever now, and I finally read this book this month. I gave this book 5 fucking stars. It was amazing, okay? It was incredible. I don't know how Richard Lehman managed to do this, but normally whenever a book is this long, and by this long I'm talking 500 pages, whenever a book is this long, I end up getting bored. However, Richard Lehman managed to put me in a state of anxiety, of dread, and intense fear for 500 straight fucking pages, and I don't know how he was able to do that, but it was just far and beyond anything I could have imagined. This is one of the best books I have read all year. It's one of the best thrillers I've read all year. If you call yourself a thriller fan and haven't read this book, or don't love this book, I literally don't want to hear another opinion out of you ever fucking again, because I can't trust you if you don't like this book, okay? Yes, this does have intense gore, but I think this is more of a thriller than an extreme horror, and it's so fucking good, okay? It's amazing. The last time I felt this happy or like shocked or thrilled or anxious reading a book was Survivor. Okay, and Survivor is another deal breaker. If you don't love that book, that's totally fine, because extreme horror is not for everyone. But if you don't love that book, I just have no faith in us ever having the same taste in books. I will just never trust your recommendations ever again. Yeah, just like, Anyway, in that long rant, I neglected to tell you all what this book was about. I'm getting so tired, you guys. So in this book, we follow this woman named Jody, and at the beginning of the book, she is sleeping over in the house of her friend Evelyn, and one night it gets really hot, so they go and try to turn the air conditioning unit on, only to discover that a bunch of killers have broken into the house and killed Evelyn's entire family, and they proceed to kill Evelyn in front of Jody, okay? So Jody and her brother need to now get the fuck out of there. And that's basically the first act of the book. It's basically this intense chase sequence of Jody and Evelyn's 12-year-old brother trying to escape this situation because they're getting pursued by these fucking crazy killers, okay? But here's where the story gets interesting. So, we have Jody's point of view, and then we cut to the killer's point of view. His name is Simon, I think. And the catch is that Simon, if he doesn't manage to kill Jody, the people who he works with are gonna kill his entire family. So you have people who are on the run, and then you have someone chasing them, and then the person chasing them is being chased by other people. Okay, so it is high stakes all over. It is 500 pages of pure intensity and adrenaline. The gore is intense. It is really good. It is really gnarly. So it does go into like borderline extreme horror territory, but that's why it reminds me of Survivor so much, because for those of you who read that book, you will know that it starts off as extreme horror, and then there's like a huge like midway plot twist, which then turns it into a thriller book. And that mixture of intense thriller but with extreme horror gore, it just strikes such a fantastic sweet spot to me where both of my favorite genres just blend together, and it's just so incredible. And yeah, another book that did this was The Groomer by John Nathan. So if you loved one, read the other. Okay, so after I read this amazing manga called Blue Flag, and in this manga we follow these 4 high school students, 2 guys and 2 girls, and we basically follow them as they navigate their relationships, their crushes, their first loves with one another, and there are a lot of LGBT themes. I'm gonna go through all the volumes really quickly. I gave the first 3 volumes 5 stars, and then for volume 4, I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was not as eventful as the first 3, but I still liked it because anime/manga character-driven slice of life stuff is what I live for. That is very much the genre I would put this manga in. It is a very character-driven slice of life story. Do you know the movie Ocean Waves, that straight-to-video Studio Ghibli movie? Those vibes? Yeah. Okay, so volume 5 I gave 3 stars because we followed this girl named Mami, and I was like, why? I guess I can see why her commentary was relevant, but I was bored by this volume. Volume 6 I gave 3.5 out of 5 stars because that cliffhanger ending had me shitting myself. Now volume 7, let's get into this. I saw some critiques that volume 7 focused on the side characters and their reaction to the LGBT identity of certain characters in the main cast, and how they were making it about themselves rather than us focusing on the main cast. I know some people hated this volume, okay? But this volume to me was realistic. I know for a fact, and I know with firsthand experience, that not every reaction to you coming out is gonna be good. Okay, it's not gonna be all smiles and rainbows, and that sucks to suck, but that's life, okay? And this manga is a slice of life. It does take a more intense approach to the horrors of coming out and being outed, in my opinion. Also, the ending of chapter 47, that was emotionally brutal. The ending of that chapter to me, real quick, conveyed to me that love can be tough, but it's still love, you know? The speech an older brother gives one of the characters at the end was intense. And it really does reinforce the fact that these high school characters that we're following are at that age where they misinterpret pragmaticism as harshness. It's just so real. And the reason I love this volume is because this reinforced to me, with what I said earlier and this specific speech, that this was a slice of life that actually got the life part down, okay? It got the life part down. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I know some people will likely be like, this is unrealistic and this is bullshit, but look, I'm speaking my truth, and I thought this volume was fantastic. What this book doesn't do is wallow in blissful escapism, and I truly appreciate it for that, okay? Here's the controversy. Volume 5. I gave this volume 5 stars, okay? I fucking love this volume. I loved it so much. For anyone who disliked this volume, I can see where you're coming from. I would advise you to reread the last 2 chapters with the soundtrack of the film Ocean Waves playing. I'll try to link it down below, but it makes all the difference. I don't know if it's because I read the whole series in one day and was able to see why the book ended the way it did. I thought that there was enough foreshadowing throughout the story to convey that ending was gonna be what it was, okay? And it was a pretty shocking plot twist, but it was just good, okay? Like, the ending left me a blubbering mess. In this manga's entirety, despite the fact that some volumes were better than others, collectively, I give this whole series 5 stars. Amazing, amazing. It just felt so real and just had so much gravitas to it because it just has such a real, distinct feeling to it that makes you feel both nostalgic yet grateful that that part of life is already over for those of you who read it at my age, you know? So yeah, Blue Flag, 10 out of 10. Fucking amazing manga, love it. Okay, after Blue Flag, I'm gonna go through these last ones really quick. I reread volume 1 of Junjo Romantica, which was like my favorite yaoi anime as a kid. And it was good. I mean, I gave it 4 stars. I wish I'd continued on, but the anime art is far better than the manga art. So I think I'm gonna just rewatch the anime and read the manga volumes that were not adapted, okay? So yeah, that's my game plan. I also read Pretty Little Wife by Darby Kane, which is a thriller about this woman who kills her husband and she stages this suicide and she finds out that the body is missing. Okay, so she's like, did I botch this and did he survive and walk off? Or did someone find out my plan and take him and are they gonna frame me? Okay, the twist at the end was really good, but I felt like this book was a very half-assed version of a certain other book that I'm not gonna name, but that I totally gave 5 stars to and vlogged very recently. Let's put it that way. And then I read Flowers in the Attic by VC Andrews for a vlog. This book was one that was a very powerful experience. It was so sad that it reminded me of the film Grave of the Fireflies, but while that film is an anti-war film, this is a very takes a very harsh critique of religious fundamentalism and just how big a role that plays in generational trauma. So I'm not really gonna get into this so much because like I'm really tired, and I have a full vlog where it's like spoiler and non-spoiler, so check that out. Oh boy. Next, I read The Exorcist's House by Nick Roberts, and this was for Gabby and Olivia's readathon, Camp Weekend Ween. I hate this book so fucking much, okay? I gave this book 1 star. It was literally every single cliche that you've seen in an Exorcist story before. It's about this dumb white family, of course, that moves into this house in the middle of nowhere. They're gonna flip it, shit like that, maybe get more money out of it. I don't fucking remember. And we learn that the previous occupant was an exorcist and something bad happened before they came here. They go to the basement, the door is all like nailed shut in the shape of a cross. I can give you a blank paper and tell you to write down what you think happens in the story, and you're gonna be right. If you've seen any horror movie with an exorcism in it, if you've seen The Exorcist or Exorcism of Emily Rose, anything with a devil in it, or exorcisms like Rosemary's Baby, Exorcist 3, The Omen, any of that shit, you know exactly where this is gonna go, okay? Don't bother. And because this book was so bad, I was like, I don't want to read monster-themed horror because the readathon was monster-themed. So instead, I read Monster Smut, which led me to read the manga Titan's Bride. I have a vlog somewhere, it'll probably be up at some point, but in this manga series, we follow this guy named Koichi who is transported to this other world of titans and elves and magical creatures, and he is told that he is going to be the bride of a titan. Okay, so this is an ongoing manga series. I think that only 4 volumes are out so far. I read everything that was available to me. I gave every single volume 5 stars. It's not special by any means, but it did hit me in the romance bone that I did. Oh my god, that sounds so wrong. No. It did exactly what the package said it would do, okay? It is smutty. Monster smut. Very sexually inventive, and I was shocked at how much I was blushing. So yeah, 5 stars, does exactly what it says on the box. Last 3 books, I got this. Next, I buddy read the book Tentacles and Triathlons with my friend Manda on her reading sprints. I will try to get these vlogs up at some point. I moved to Sydney, Australia, so like my life is really hectic and busy right now. So bear with me, okay? We follow this Kraken guy, like tentacle kraken creature, like Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean. We follow him, and he develops this infatuation with this human man named Reese. Now Reese had this very traumatizing encounter with a monster when he was younger, so he is still quite hesitant to develop a relationship with Cyrus. But then one thing leads to another, and Cyrus ends up training Reese for this triathlon. And during their training, things get interesting, and tentacles. Yeah, I thought this book was really funny. I gave it 4 stars. It's not a profound romance by any means, but it is a very goofy, funny book with tons of tentacle smut, so another one that does exactly what it says on the box. And then next, I buddy read the book, the first volume of Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi with one of my closest friends, Gabby, over at Gabby Reads. I gave this volume 4 stars because not much happened, but what I will say is that we follow this very bizarre mother-son relationship. The art is really good. It's very silent, okay, so there's not much text per page, but the story does move forward because Shuzo Oshimi is amazing at drawing facial expressions, and the expression you see on a character's face is so detailed that it conveys way more than any text ever could, okay? It's very silent but eerie and disturbing, and the story does have clues regarding the underlying darkness and the very toxic, domineering relationship this mother has with her son. But there is a twist at the end. There's a certain thing that happens at the end of this volume that had my jaw on the fucking floor, okay? So if Gabby wants to reread the rest of this series, I am super down. I'm down. And then finally, the last book I read for this month was book 31, and this is Soul Eater by Lily Mayne. I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book was incredible. This is another monster smut book, but it's very different from Tentacles and Triathlons in how it's not funny. It's actually really good and really engaging and borderline tragic, okay? So basically this book is not just monster smut. It's set in this dystopian world where monsters have taken over and human colonies live in clusters on the coastline of the United States, okay? So they're all on the coastline while the entire middle part of the country is overrun by these creatures. There's barely any signs of humanity in the middle of the country, and that portion of the country is called the Wastes. So at the beginning of the book, we learn that there is this creature called the Wynn who comes out every 3 years, I believe, and enacts this like genocide on humans. And so the military is trying to take this creature out. Now, at the beginning of the book, we follow this guy named Danny who has this tragic backstory because his mom died, so he was forced to enlist in the military to keep himself alive. And at the beginning of the story, we follow him and this group of people who are tasked with killing the Wynn. Now, they find the Wynn, they try to kill him, this cloaked creature with horns, and the Wynn takes out Danny's entire squad. And Danny wakes up and we learn that the Wynn has been captured and he was the last remaining survivor of that mission. And the only person the Wynn is willing to let interrogate it is Danny. I really don't want to give much away, but this is a very sprawling quest across the vast wastes with monsters. It's also a very slow burn human monster love story that I thought was really beautiful and very poignant and very well done. And I just have a lot, I think I have a lot more to say on this, but I will hopefully get that vlog up at some point. But I gave this 4.5 stars. I loved it. The monster smut was so fucking hot, bitch. The monster's bodily functions, dude, monsters. This monster shit is here to stay. Like, I am fully invested in this subgenre of romance. It is so good. I love it. I love it, okay? This readathon went so wrong, but so right. Okay, so I'm currently editing the video and I'm a dumbass. There was a book that I neglected to talk about, so I'm gonna just touch on it really briefly over here. And that is the book Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. I should say, first of all, there's a really funny story behind why I even chose to read this book to begin with, and that's because my friend Haley and I, Haley Hughes, were doing these reading sprints, and on the sprints she was like, read Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. It's one of the best thrillers ever. If you don't give it 5 stars, I will eat a sock on live stream. I read the book and it was really good. It's my first Jennifer Hillier book. I went in knowing nothing and I emerged very happy. I gave it 5 stars. It's a very dark thriller and it did have several twists that shocked me to my core. So we follow this woman who at the beginning of the book we learn goes to jail because she was found guilty of having helped her boyfriend many years ago cover up the murder of her best friend, right? Now, while she's in jail, the boyfriend escapes, and in those last few years, certain murders start to happen that match the murder that her boyfriend did to her best friend. So she's like, is my boyfriend going back to killing? Is there a copycat killer? And there are so many twists and turns. It's really good. It's super dark. I love the characters. There was a certain scene where a detective is telling the parent of a victim that her daughter was murdered, and that scene made me almost freaking cry, okay? So fantastic characters, super thrilling, super dark, really intense, really gritty. Love the characters, love Jennifer Hillier's writing, and will definitely check out more from this author. And with that being said, I'm never filming a wrap-up again because this was exhausting. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I don't know if I'm gonna ever film a wrap-up for July, August, or September. If you want to see that, comment down below. Think of a funny, interesting title that isn't July, September, or August wrap-up. Like, think of a clickbaity title for me if you want me to ever do that video. But until then, thank you so much for watching. Also, if you made it this far into the video, please be sure to leave this emoji. I'm gonna be very curious to see how many of these I see, considering the fact that this is probably gonna be like an hour long, okay? I hope to see you all in future videos, and as always, take care. I lose myself